I can remember way back when the GC first got online with CompuServe. Maybe some of you, I have somewhere in my office, I've got a plaque saying I'm one of the charter members of CompuServe in the GC. And then eventually, as we all know, Adventist cyberspace started. And it could be a pretty cutthroat place. And I dove into it, and I just loved it. And things got out of hand, and eventually at one point, Elder Wilson suggested that maybe I stay off. Well, I guess I'm confessing I didn't really want to stay off, so I didn't. But the irony was, on the blogs, they were saying Elder Wilson didn't have the guts to get on here, so he's sending Cliff to do his fight for him. And you can't win either way. But anyway, if you get on the blogs, there's an awful lot on there. And I've noticed that number of views are being pushed from within, and that if any one of these were true, I'm saying that they would undermine the foundation of everything we believe. And I'm not just going to tell you, I want to try to show you this morning some of the things that are out there and some of the implications of it. Anyway, one of them that you hear is that the little horn of Daniel 8 is King Antiochus Epiphanes. This is being pushed and pushed and pushed on the blogs. Now, you might think, what's the big deal? Well, the big deal is this. Antiochus Epiphanes passed away from history about 2 centuries before Jesus. Okay, vanished from history, which means that Daniel 8, the 2,300 years, everything was completed 2 centuries before Jesus. Okay? That would mean that the entire prophetic foundation of our church, 1844, the Great Disappointment, pre-Advent judgment, it's a myth. It's a myth, and then you might as well take the great controversy and toss it in the trash. Okay? So if they're correct, if that's correct, and it's interesting too, you could pick up almost any Bible commentary written in the last 100 years. And every one of them, without exception, will have King Antiochus Epiphanes as the little horn power in Daniel 8. The only exception is the Seventh-day Adventist Church. Okay, now, let me try to keep this as simple as I can. I believe the entire key to our whole prophetic message, you could find in Daniel 2, simple Daniel 2. Babylon, Media, Persia, Greece, and after Greece, you got the iron in the legs. The iron in the legs goes all the way down to the feet and toes. So the power that comes up after Greece, ancient Greece, is one power. It goes all the way down to the end of the world where it's supernaturally destroyed at the end of the world. If you remember that, one power after ancient Greece, you could be protected from 90% of the heresy that comes on prophecy. In the parallel prophecy of Daniel 7, Babylon, Media, Persia, Greece, one power comes up, the fourth beast power, the little horn in the fourth beast power, that goes all the way to the end of the world where it's like, as in Daniel 2, it's supernaturally destroyed at the end of the world. And also, lest I forget, right before the end of the world, right before the second coming, in Daniel 7, you have a massive judgment scene in heaven. A judgment scene, an unmistakable judgment scene in heaven prior to the second advent of Jesus. I don't know about you, but that sounds to me like a pre-advent judgment. And then in the parallel prophecy of Daniel 8, you've got Media Persia mentioned, Greece mentioned. You've got one power that comes up after Greece, and it extends all the way to the time of the end. I mean, Daniel 8 twice says it's Le-8 Kates, the time of the end. Le-Moed Kates, the appointed end. And we know from Daniel 2 and Daniel 7, the end is the end of the world. So the point here, how could this possibly be Antiochus Epiphanes, who vanished from history 200 years before Jesus came? And Jesus himself points to the prophecies in Daniel, and he says, and talks about Daniel the prophet, and Jesus points to him in the future from Jesus. So in the end, the bottom line is, no matter how many Bible scholars or even people within tell us it's Antiochus Epiphanes, it never was Antiochus, it never will be Antiochus, no matter how many people, no matter the popular consent that it is. Now, directly linked to this is we're attacked, even from within, on the role of Rome in last day events. There's one retired church, he's retired, and he goes around saying the whole thing is nothing but 19th century American anti-Catholicism, American nativism, about the role of Rome in prophecy. I'm sorry, the poor man doesn't get it. Our understanding of Rome is built solidly on history and prophecy. Let me bring you back again, Daniel 2. One power comes up after Greece, and after ancient Greece, and goes all the way to the end of the world. It's supernaturally destroyed at the end of the world. Well, if it's not Rome, then you name me another power that goes up after ancient Greece and exists till it's supernaturally destroyed at the end of the world. Daniel 7, same thing. One power comes up after Greece, the fourth beast, it goes all the way through to the end of the world, supernaturally destroyed. If it's not Rome, name me another power. Same thing with Daniel 8. Medo-Persia is named. Greece is named. One power comes up all the way, supernaturally destroyed at the end of time. So in the end, only one power fits. It is solely, totally, only Rome, and that's all it ever was, no matter how politically incorrect that might seem. And then in Revelation 13, the same power reappears and is depicted not only pointing back to its past persecution, but then it points to its future persecution in end times as well. It's the same power. I'm sorry if people find this embarrassing, but our prophetic scenario is rooted in something as foundational and immovable as world history. This is world history. You know, when we reject the role of Rome, we're rejecting clear biblical teachings. You know, I need faith to believe the dead are going to be resurrected. I need faith to believe that Jesus is going to come in the clouds of heaven. I don't need faith to see Rome in Bible prophecy. It's right there. Okay? Now, you say, shouldn't Jesus be the center of our message? Oh, come on. Come on, give me a break. The first angel's message starts out with what? The everlasting gospel. Okay? So the first angel's message is the everlasting gospel. The call is the first angel's message is to worship the Creator. Who's the Creator? Jesus. Okay? Finally, the description of God's people, those who keep the commandments of God and the faith of Jesus. Christ is the center of our message. And the idea that focusing on the three angels' message somehow takes us off the one, Jesus, that's a myth. Okay? And then two, the mark of the beast. Our scenario about the mark of the beast. Constantly attacked, one way or another on there. And really, this is worth a book, actually. You know, recently, I was reading the Gospels, and I saw something. How many times was Jesus threatened over death by the religious leaders on an issue regarding the seventh-day Sabbath? I never thought about that before. The seventh-day Sabbath. I mean, are we sort of being given a model, a precursor right in our face in the Gospels about what's going to happen in the last days? You know, what those who keep the commandments of God and the faith of Jesus will face. Okay. Well, you know, last week I was flying and I wound up in Qatar. And, you know, I'm a little, name like Goldstein, in Qatar. And it was Sabbath, and I wanted to read my Hebrew Bible, but I just wasn't going to be a fool. So I just kept my Hebrew Bible away, and I was sitting in the airport, and I had a book on creation. And I'm reading, and some guy's next to me sleeping, and he wakes up, and he's a missionary, and we're talking, and he sees what I'm reading, and I'm talking about creation. And I said to him, what doctrine is so important, is so vital that God demands 1/7 of our lives every week to remember? And I don't want to push the Sabbath thing so much. I just wanted to push, which day it was. He goes, wow, I never thought of that. And I said, well, I'm an Adventist, and I believe the day is important, but the doctrine itself, I think about it. What teaching do we have is so important that God demands 1/7 of our lives every week without exception? It's the doctrine of creation, right? The foundation. Everything we believe, every doctrine, everything we believe rests on the doctrine of creation. And where did my iPad go? All right, I'm used to. Okay, God demands, really, that's why God demands 1/7 of our lives. Creation, then, is like the foundation of all our beliefs, and embedded is the eternal, immutable sign of that creation, the seventh-day Sabbath. So to usurp the seventh-day Sabbath is really to usurp the Lord's authority at the most prime level possible of Him as the Creator. You can't get any further back. You get to the Creator Himself. You can't overturn God. You can't usurp God. So He did the next best thing. You usurp the symbol of God as the Creator. That's why the first angel's message, fear God and give glory to Him and worship Him who made the heaven and the earth. We all know that. It brings us language directly back to the creation, to the fourth commandment. Again, a doctrine that's so important. God, 1/7 of our lives to remember it. Now, what do we have in Revelation? Revelation teaches in the end, the issue is worship. Do we worship the Creator, or do we worship the beast and his image? And the foundational symbol of Him as the Creator, and the beast is the power that we know was involved in changing the symbol, in usurping the symbol. The very power that sought to change the symbol. Can you see the point here? We're depicted as God's people are depicted as keeping the commandments of God, which includes the only specific commandment that points to God as the Creator, the one power that the beast, the one commandment that the beast power sought to change. Sure, the real issue is our love, our loyalty to God. No one's going to deny that. But love, this is the love of God, that we keep His commandments. And that includes the fourth commandment. See, that's why I can see theologically the issue about the Sabbath and the mark of the beast. Do you worship the Creator, whose sign of the creation is the Sabbath, or do you worship the power that changed the Sabbath? The only thing more foundational is God Himself, and you can't usurp Him as the Creator So you do the next best thing. You seek to usurp the foundational sign of him as the creator. Again, to usurp the seventh-day Sabbath is to usurp the Lord's authority at the most prime level possible. It's to get to the core, the foundation, and try to uproot it from there. In this context, it's really hard for me when I read Revelation, worship the beast, worship the creator. It's hard for me to see how the issue is going to be anything other than the seventh-day Sabbath. Okay, now, of course, you have to hear this all the time. How is this going to happen? How possibly could this happen? Well, it was funny. I was born again 40 years ago this fall. And I remember studying with the Adventists. And I remember studying about American prophecy with these Adventists, the whole thing. I remember 1979. I mean, America, we are still licking our wounds from the Vietnam War debacle. The Sandinistas were taken over in Nicaragua. Fidel Castro was sending troops to Angola. The Soviet Union was firmly ensconced in Moscow, had a firm grip on Eastern Europe. In Southeast Asia, the nations were falling to communist regimes. We couldn't kick Fidel Castro out of Cuba because of Soviet military might. And I remember just thinking, in fact, I even remember an independent journal back then had an article, and it mocked our view of Roman prophecy, saying everybody knows the final persecuting power has to be the Soviet Union. Because again, I struggled with it. Go back, if you're old enough, 1979, the Soviet Union, there was this behemoth. How could prophecy have ever been fulfilled? But going against common sense, going against reason, going against everything my eyes could see, going against everything you could see, I said, all right, Lord, I'm going to have to take it on faith and trust you. And who knows, within 10, whoever would imagine, boom, overnight, the Soviet Union disappears, and newspapers are talking about America as the world's only superpower. Okay, so my point, I have no idea. Nobody does how end-time events are going to unfold. I have no idea. But I don't want to be so narrow and so unimaginative that is not to envision that radical changes could come and bring about final events, Even if the changes now seem as unlikely as it would be in 1979, that the Soviet Union would just vanish, disappear from the world scene. Anyway, it's hard to believe that people are still attacking the day-year principle. After all the work that our scholars have done, brilliant work on the day-year principle. And again, if the day-year principle isn't true, the prophetic foundation of our church vanishes. Simple as that. The day-year principle is false. Our message is based and built on a lie. Now, let me just give you one example of how ingrained that not only is the day-year principle valid, I believe the places where we use it, the prophecies make no sense without it. Let's look at Daniel 8:14, the 2300-day, 2300-year prophecy. Remember, there's Medo Persia, there's Greece, there's the other power. And then what happens is these two beings are talking. And it says, and I want to read it from the Hebrew. Well, I'll read some of it, and then I'll translate. And I heard one saint speaking and said one saint to the other who was speaking. Now listen to this. Ad matai, how long until ad matai, how long or until when hechazon, hatamid, and pesha, and the desolation sanctuary given a trampling. But the word there, ad matai, hechazon, it's the word for vision. There are two words for vision in Daniel 8. There's one word for the vision of the 2,300 days, and then there's this word hazon for the entire prophecy of Daniel 8. So he's asking the question, how long are all these things happening that were depicted in Daniel 8? You got Medo Persia, you got Greece, and for argument's sake, I'll even give everybody their idiotic Antiochus Epiphanes. You can have that. How long were all these things? Medo Persia, Greece, and whatever comes next. Okay? And the answer is, it's all be done in 2,300 days, 6 years and 4 months. Makes no sense. You can't get through Medo Persia in 6 years and 4 months, much less Greece. But voila, you add the day-year principle. And suddenly, instead of 6 years, you got 2,300 years. You got everything you need to cover it. Plus 2, Daniel 8 isn't about, it's not a zoology lesson. It's not about a ram. It's not about a goat. These are symbols. They're symbols for truths. Okay, so they're prophetic symbols, and you're given a prophetic time, which is why the prophecy makes no sense apart from the day-year principle there. And again, if this doesn't apply, no day-year principle, our whole message gets flushed down. Well, anyway. All right. Okay, my favorite subject. What about the Seventh-day Darwinians? And I know that people are offended by that. Well, I don't care. I just got done finished reading a biography of George Orwell. Finished it my last trip. And Orwell wrote that dystopian novel, 1984. He wrote it in the 40s. And he was talking about newspeak, about how words stop meaning anything, or they mean what the leaders want. We are Seventh-day Adventists. Seventh day, and anybody with a modicum of intellectual honesty knows the seventh day refers to 7 literal days. To take the name Seventh-day Adventist and believe, well, no, it really means billions of years and on, I'm sorry. I really struggle with that. Look, here's the bottom line. If God used billions of years to create life, and then he gives us some idiotic, asinine story about a 6-day creation done without anything, then why would I trust anything in the Bible? Why would I trust anything? Everything we believe, I challenge anybody anywhere that nothing is, if evolution is true, everything we believe is ultimately, utterly destroyed, if that's correct. Let me give you an example. How about the death of Jesus on the cross for us? Is that big enough? How about that one? Okay, look, Paul, over and over in Romans 5. Adam and Jesus. Adam brought sin, Adam brought death, Christ brought life and righteousness. Over and over, almost half a dozen times, there's this one-to-one, Adam, Jesus. In 1 Corinthians as well, Paul says, for as in Adam all die, so in Christ all will be made alive. Okay? But there's one slight problem. In any kind of evolutionary model with billions and billions of years of suffering and death, There's no sinless Adam. In the Bible, a sinless Adam brought sin, suffering, and death. In any evolutionary model, it was suffering and death that ultimately led to Adam or whoever it would be. Okay? Let me read you a quote from a theistic evolutionist. First, and I appreciate the man's honesty. First, Adam never existed. Second, Adam never sinned because he never existed. Consequently, sin did not enter the world on account of Adam. Third, Adam was never judged by God to suffer and die. He's honest. He's saying in evolution, you can't have this. And then, without an Adam who fell into sin, at least the whole cross, at least what Paul teaches, the whole first coming becomes a non-event. And the first coming and the second coming of Jesus are linked together. They're really inseparable. But if you can't trust what the Bible says about Jesus' first coming, why are you going to trust anything what it says about his second coming? And then what supposedly happens at the second coming? Okay, we're going to be raised from the dust in the twinkling of an eye. Now think about this, though. Someone dies 1,800 years ago, and body was thrown into the Aegean Sea and had been eaten by 5,000 generations of squid or crab or whatever. And then in the twinkling of an eye, he's going to be recreated? No, if God could do that the second time, why didn't he instantly create us at the first time as he told us? Instead of supposedly billions of years of this long, involved process. And then we've got the new heavens and the new earth. I mean, is that going to be a supernatural act of God? Or is that going to take, again, billions and billions and billions of years? Unless he does, and if he does it supernaturally the second time, instantly, why don't we believe him for what he did the first time, what the Word of God says? Anyway, so that's the, and then look, I'm running out of time here. I can't believe that in the 21st century we're dealing with the anti-Trinitarians, that we're still having to deal with that as well, okay? And then anyway, look, and the fact that it's coming from within our ranks shouldn't, really, in one sense, it shouldn't be surprising because, you think about it. Paul, it's hot up here. Paul had to deal with all manner of heresy. Back then, even at the time of Paul, the early church, okay, from people who denied the resurrection or those who said it already happened. Paul had to combat a different gospel that was so bad, he said it was no gospel at all. Okay? And then there was the author of Jude. He said, for certain men have crept in. And then he talked about on God who turned the grace of God into lewdness. Or Peter, who warned there were false prophets among the people, as there will be even false teachers among you. It'd be fascinating to do a study how much of the New Testament is dealing with error or heresy or subversion from within. Destructive heresies, is what Peter says, false teachers who will secretly bring in destructive heresies. We've just looked, I believe, at a few of them. Let me end on this note for what it's worth. If God's church, right after Christ's first coming, faced error from within, how naive to think his church right before the second won't either. I end on that.